Whenever you're ready, Bob.
Okay, thanks. And so, yes, firstly, just apologies on behalf of Cheryl. She's not 100% today, but she's here in spirit and sending her love and best wishes for a good night for us all. So on her behalf, I'd just like to invite everyone to this somewhat experimental evening because we had a few live in-house meetings last year, but mainly for the last few years via COVID, we've been on Zoom. Tonight, we're doing a bit of both. We've got Greg Clare, our esteemed speaker, coming in on Zoom. Greg, there's about 10 or 11 of us here in the room watching live, and a good audience also online. So welcome to everyone. So tonight is presentation, as is custom. Greg presenting a little bit of an overview of the coming year 2025, and I'll leave that to Greg to articulate he goes through. But I just thought, just such an interesting one, it's just worth hearing a little bit about your background, which as a former president of the Astrology Association of New South Wales and SARs, Greg has lectured internationally, written for Mountain Astrologer and the FAA Journal, and he's been an explorer of Hellenistic and Classical Astrology, among many other streams of astrology. Greg's adventurous spirit has taken him to the Himalayas, where he shared astrological insights with Tibetan monks. And I'm sure they shared some insights with you, Greg. And his creativity extends to music and songwriting, inspired by his rich life experiences. Greg's journey bridges practical wisdom and celestial exploration, inspiring all who learn from him. So, Greg, I'd like to hand it over to you. I know we've just got Leo rising as we speak, which is perhaps a good omen. Greg is a Leo. And as we speak, Pluto is setting, going from the light into the dark. So whether that's ominous of the talk, I don't know. Good luck.
We should see.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Bob. You're just a little bit breaking up on your side. Hopefully I'm okay. So welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to be back at SARS and its dual operation. And a kudos to everybody that at SARS that's kept SARS going. 1938, we were first established, and it's been there offering, if you like, the community a place for a voice and for research, and for all those that have participated over the years and are still participating. Thank you all for coming along, and thank you all for your work. I know how tireless it is. I go back into the 90s with SARS and was on the committee for a long time, and I know how much time it takes. So thank you, everybody. So yeah, aren't we in interesting times, to say the least? It's a world year 2025, which when we take it down and strip it to its basics, it's number 9. And number 9 is a very interesting number because it asks us to let go of everything. It's it is the Pythagorean number, if you like to put it that way. We all know about the special properties of 9. So they're always special years. And to go along with it, the lunation the other day there was, the new moon lunation was, of course, the wood snake, the Chinese wood snake. 60 years ago, the Chinese wood snake was there, and it's back again. And if we cast our minds back to 60 years ago, I think it takes us back to 1965. Is that right, Roz? Yeah, little nod there.
Yes.
Yeah, so, you know, we all remember American politics in 1965, don't we? And for those of you that were only born this this millennium, or those that are much younger, cast your eyes onto the internet or onto the books. And 1964, 65 were all very interesting years for the US. So what can we expect this year? So let's have a little bit of a look. There's a bit of awe and shock here for the first couple of minutes, but that's what it's all about. So hopefully this will work. Why aren't you?
Every year, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists sets the doomsday clock.
The so-called doomsday clock.
Doomsday clock.
The doomsday clock.
The doomsday clock.
The clock is a metaphor for estimating humanity's proximity to catastrophe. In 2023, the Bulletin set the clock at 90 seconds to midnight, the closest to disaster it has ever been, citing the war in Ukraine, the COVID-19 pandemic, and cyber-enabled disinformation. In 2024, the time was held at 90 seconds to midnight. The Bulletin traces its origins back to the Manhattan Project and the scientists who hoped to warn the world about the dangers of their creation. The clock was introduced in 1947 and originally set at 7 minutes to midnight. The Bulletin has been setting the clock for more than 75 years. Originally, the Bulletin focused primarily on nuclear risk, but as technology advanced and human impacts on the planet became more pronounced, the scope of coverage expanded. Today, the Bulletin is focused on reducing the threats posed by nuclear weapons, climate change, and the potential misuse of biological science and other disruptive technologies.
So hopefully you all heard that. I think it points to where we are in a 9-year and where we are all together as humanity. I want to focus, before I go on to the year, I just want to bring some things up. In 2014, I wrote an article, which there's part of it still on my website. I haven't updated my website, and sorry about that, for a long time because I've been too busy doing other projects. However, just get out of the way. What you have up here on your screen, can everyone see the show okay with the screen? The wheel? Cool?
Yes, mate.
Excellent. So Saras Cycle 12017 South commenced on the 26th of May in 933 AD. Why have I got that up there? Well, back in 2015, we had an occurrence of an event, and I've got a couple of events that lead up to, and as I don't know if many of you know, and those that do have read the articles, I wrote articles in 2017, 18, 19 and 20 and presented presentations on what 2020 decade would bring us. And it hasn't let us down in that sense, and it saddens me greatly. But as human beings, archetypes that surround us don't seem to dissipate. We are still, even though, and caveat here, apology to anyone that has a cultural interest or belief that's not similar to mine. I don't mean to demean anybody in what I'm actually presenting or what I'm saying, but we're still dinosaurs. We haven't learned. We've still managed to carry forth the archetypes that surround the Earth. And those that have listened to me before, I stress that archetypes themselves of the planets, from our geocentrical perspective, this planet Earth has at its core Mars, which is iron, which is basically the core of this Earth. And it erupts every now and then and forms land, which is Saturn and the archetype of Saturn. So that's the volcanic ejaculation of the molten lava. In my research over many, many years, and there's articles on my website about this, when it came to, and I have to give kudos to Bernadette Brady many, many years ago, way back in the early 90s, when she was doing some research on eclipses, she managed to put some data together, which I used, which made it a lot easier for my journey. But what I do is I go back to the original eclipse birth, and I see if there's any significators that might tell us a story about that continuation of the Saras cycle. And for those that don't know, eclipses run in families called Saras cycles, and an eclipse starts at either the South Pole or at the North Pole, and they either descend or ascend. And those times of about 1200 years, and when the eclipse gets to around 600 years, it's on the equator, and you start to get totality. Before that, they're partial. That's just a small rundown. However, what I have here in front of you is the commencement of what I wrote a story about in 2015, which it ties in. Stay with me, because this story ties into where we are today, and in particular, the new president-elect of Donald Trump, and how America's journey itself is tied into Uranus and to these particular degrees. It's fascinating when you see this, and you can see that this commencement was at 9 degrees of Gemini. Now, 9 degrees of Gemini, for those that don't know, is called the nuclear degree. Our wonderful mundane astrologer Ed Tamplin used to love using the term, the nuclear degree. And why we say the nuclear degree, because every time there was a nuclear, from 1930 onwards through to 1938, 1940, 1941, when we did the first nuclear explosions, 9 degrees has been present, and also 9 degrees, 8 degrees such and such is where Uranus is in the American chart. 84 years ago, in 1941, we had the atomic age begin. 84 years prior to that, we had 1858, which was, of course, the middle of the American Civil War. You go another 84 years back from that in 1776, and you had the British and the southern and northern states fighting for the independence of America. If you go back another 84 years, of course, you have the French Revolution. So the whole idea of how particular, and those that know me know that I teach astronomy, and I'm very, very passionate about astronomy, underpinning astrology, and the archetypes lay within. The planets give us the messages, and we have to decipher them. So not a lot of people do this because it has a lot of time. But what you can see up there at the moment is 24 degrees of Scorpio and the midheaven conjunct, of course, the North Node. And down here we have 24 degrees on the IC with the South Node, the 9 degrees here. Now, why are they very significant? Because the US President Donald Trump, his IC is 24 degrees of Scorpio, and his MC is 24 degrees of Taurus. So it's very relevant, and the 9 degrees we'll see as we move along, and the 20 degrees of Mercury, of course, sits on his 11th house stellium of Gemini, including his sun, which is at 22 degrees of Gemini, with his moon at 21 degrees of Sagittarius. And of course, Donald Trump was a lunar eclipse baby. So I pay a certain amount of importance on all of this, because when we understand how eclipses work and the nodes work, they lay the conditions for how humans and how the collective society is infiltrated by these archetypes and how different people present them. And when we see the charts, they fit into that. That's the whole idea of what I'm saying here. So let me get on with things. So the solar eclipse 120 also occurred on the 20th of March 2015. I wrote an article on this and I presented on this. It was at 29 degrees of 2719 seconds of Pisces. Now, this is a very significant degree right at the present moment because all of the planets are passing over that at the present time. So you're going to have Neptune going into Aries, and you're going to have Saturn go into Aries. The nodes have just gone into onto this degree. So it's a very significant, and because it is also the Aries ingress, 0 degrees of Aries it's a very significant degree. However, this eclipse, which you see here on the North Pole, started over in Greenland. Well, it actually started over in New York and went past Greenland and finished on the North Pole, right on the North Pole. And what is significant about that is the equinox eclipse itself was at 29:27. Now, that eclipse departed with its alignment on the North Pole. So what happened is the sun was hanging on the horizon from an astronomical perspective, was hanging on the horizon as this eclipse ushered itself out. And so I wrote that the world will never be the same again. That's what my statement was, based on the fact that we had this eclipse coming across and going out right on the portal of this planet. And the portal is the axis of this planet that faces north into the celestial sky. It's on a tilt, but the North Pole itself, that's where the eclipse went out. I was the only one that ever wrote about this, and I was astounded. The next year after this, President Trump was elected in America, and from that moment on, the world has changed. So what I said prior to that, I still stand by. And I'm not going to go into the full details of all of that. I just want to point that out at this present moment. Okay, so the Aries ingress of 2015 was on an island, Barentsburg, in sort of out there in the middle of the near Greenland of all places, and that's the ingress itself. There was some very significant, interesting, if you like, planetary archetypes playing out in this. And you can see Neptune on the IC. You might see the MC and the IC in the 12th house here. That's why I use whole sign houses. When you understand how the trisection of the ecliptic and the houses that you use, which are, you know, mainly Placidus and Regmontanus and Koch and all the rest of the many trisections of the ecliptic, whole sign houses present the midheaven, which is the midheaven is the ecliptic. It's the sun's path, basically, and it can move either from the eastern side or the western side, depending on whether you're in the summer or the winter, or you're in the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere. Using whole sign houses, your MC can move all the way around and back during one season or one revolution of the Earth around the sun. But you haven't come here to hear all of that. You've come here for me to tell you about 2025, which I'm getting to. Now, the significance of what I said and presented by those eclipses that I just showed you ushered in a new president and a new time and a new wording, if you like, into human consciousness, if you like, and it's infiltrating and seeping its way up. I'm not favoured to any political party, whether they're green, red, blue, or white. All politicians, as Plato said, were painted on one side, and human beings with empathy were placed on the other side. Sorry about that, politicians, but it seems to be that way. That's what power is all about, which Pluto is about, and which I'm about to present to you, and why I put together this presentation the way it is. And you saw the doomsday clock. Another article I wrote in 2017 and 2018, I'm a great believer in, and I present and I teach astronomy and how the nuance of archetypes are changed by the position of planets moving up and down over the ecliptic. It's called latitude. and also there's declination, there's lots of other things. But however, the idea of latitude plays a lot when it comes to planets that have a cigar, say, circular or elliptical orbit around the central hub, the sun. So Pluto goes out and comes back in. Neptune sometimes crosses over Pluto's path. But when Pluto was first discovered in 1930, Pluto was rising from the south and south latitude and was seen to cross over the ecliptic. And when Pluto was on the ecliptic in 1930, 31, that's when it was photographed and discovered, and its archetype was brought into consciousness. Not that Hades wasn't there before with Greek mythology. The idea of the archetype has always been there, but it was brought into human consciousness when it was first discovered, put on a mercurial plate, followed, so you have Mercury and Saturn, you're taking a photograph and you're storing that photograph. So Pluto was born then in 1930 when it was rising, and it goes down, a long way. Our moon goes 5 degrees below the ecliptic and rises up to 5 degrees above. It forms a snake the way it goes along, and you'll understand why the Chinese and many of the early philosophers and astronomers described it as a dragon and a snake, because where it comes along, where the moon comes along and rises over the ecliptic and then goes back down again and then comes back down and goes back down, is the same as a dragon, that same action. And so these are all significant things that I introduce to people, because they nuance the story and they nuance the archetype. So Pluto crossed the ecliptic on October the 24th, 2018, and it started its descent. So it's going down now. Now, the way we work, and I'm not going to give you a great deal detail about it, but I'll just give you a hint to how it works. The idea first came from the early astrology in the Hellenistic time, was picked up by Dame Raja, that north is adventurous, pioneering, and somewhere where we're going to find something new. South latitude and going down to the bottom of as far as the plane of that particular planet can go, below the ecliptic, is familiarity. It's somewhere where we're comfortable and we want to hold on to. And it's also habitual in its sense, because that's the way we use the term to understand north and south in its essence of archetypes, and how it distributes the nuance of that and infiltrates. So I also said that in 2015 the world wouldn't be the same again, and I also emphasized that Pluto would take us into some darker areas, because in 1930 through to 1941-42, when the nuclear age started, and we could then blow ourselves up as human beings, created 4 billion years ago, which goes back 14 billion years ago to the Big Bang. All of a sudden, here's this species of primordial dinosaurs that can blow themselves up. It's an interesting philosophy to follow in the context of where we're heading now. And I said that in my article 2020 that I wrote in 2017, published in the NCGR in America. I said that 2020 would be a 40 days and 40 nights, I called it. And I said it'd be a very interesting time as we entered into the Aquarian age, and I called the Aquarian age from 2020 onwards, because we had major transits of planets. We had the conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn. We had the idea of Mars going in there first and then repeating itself. And now we have Pluto there for the next 17 to 20 years. It's very interesting to, we're in this Aquarian age, if you like. And so what I'm saying here is that we developed nuclear stuff from 1930 to where we were in 2018. We went up, 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 and up, and up over the ecliptic to our highest point, which is around 17.5 degrees, the tilt of Pluto's plane to the Earth's visual of Pluto going around the sun. And so now it's come down, and on 24th of October 2018, when it came down, it crossed the ecliptic. All planets and everything, because the sun and moon come together for an eclipse on the ecliptic. And so for me, the ecliptic is collective consciousness, if you like, that seeps up, or people's charts tap into it, and it seems to infiltrate over the whole of the collective of the world. And you can take that down to yourself, into your own neighbors, cities and neighborhoods, and your own self. But the idea here is that Pluto crossing over the ecliptic, and now for next 80 odd years, it's going to be going down till it hits the bottom. Now that's a worry because of what Uranus is doing as well, and what Saturn is doing, and what Neptune is doing, and what Pluto is doing. All of these things matter. Okay, enough talking. And as you can see up here, it was the day of Mars and the hour of Saturn. Couldn't have been any more. This is astronomically timed. It could not have been any more potent for itself. And the other thing is, when Pluto crossed the ecliptic, when planets cross the ecliptic, they mark a spot, and we call that a node. So, we know the north, we know the moon's nodes. Well, all the planets have nodes too. So when they cross over, in other words, when they're at 0, 0, 0 degrees of latitude, they're on the ecliptic. And when they're when they're doing that, they're either marking their north node or their south node. And so we can get that data from our astronomical programs. Pluto crossing the ecliptic. This is how I can give you that astronomical data. I set these programs up myself in SolarFire so I can read it. And what you can see here, hopefully you can see my pointer. Can you see my pointer there, Roz? Cool. Now you see the longitude of Pluto was at 18 degrees of Capricorn, and you can see that Saturn was at 4 degrees of Capricorn. But when we go over here, we can see that the south node of Pluto was 18 degrees, because it was crossing the ecliptic. So it was right on the ecliptic, okay? South node heading down. From the north going down, south node. But Saturn was also on Pluto's node. So you had a combination, and I wrote articles about it when I was still, because I've kind of gone off that now because I've got lots of other things to do in my life. I prolifically wrote for a long time. But what I said is, these two planets were conjunct together in Capricorn. Cast your mind back a few years. They were conjunct, and they were conjunct the south node. And I said, don't disturb the dragon's tail. And of course we did as humans, just like the allegorical stories of Eve taking the apple from the tree. These are allegoric stories that tell us and pre-warn us as human beings to be more conscious about what we're actually doing. So that's what I wanted to point out to you. The power of what Pluto crossing the ecliptic was. It was the day of Mars and the hour of Saturn. Saturn was on Pluto's south node. Pluto was on its south node. And that marked a moment in time. And that moment in time is still continuing. And that's where we are. It was even more potent when we look at declinations. If you, as astrologers, do you understand what declination is? You can look at a chart like this one-dimensional ring chart here, but it has no bearing on the astronomical data that I have listed down here. And this all makes a difference when you're understanding the power of planets, or why they work and why they don't work. And you can see here in the declination column that Pluto was at 22 degrees south, Saturn was 22 degrees south. Jupiter was 18. Mars was 18. Venus was 19 and Mercury was 19. They were all south. This was a majorly powerful moment of what we would call south or familiarity, going back to where we've been. And I have written down here on my little side notes, we've been here before. Think of Pol Pot, Hitler, Idi Amin. You know, as human beings, as I said before, I love to be an optimist. And a lot of people said to me in the early times when I presented material, they were saying, but we're going into the Aquarian age, where we're going to evolve as human beings. let me just, before I go any further, let me just read you something about the archetype of Aquarius, which I wrote on the 23rd of August 2019. Oh, I actually wrote it, in 2010. The traditional astrology assigns stewardship of the image of the water bearer Aquarius to Saturn. Modern contemporary astrological view suggests Uranus is the ruler of the sign. Exploring the myths of these titans, Saturn versus Uranus, both archetypes were titans, deities in the Greek mythology, and preceded the Olympians. They were children of the primordial deity Uranus, heaven, and Gaia, earth. Cronus was the leader of the Titans, and after he managed to overthrow his Titan father Uranus from the throne, Kronos later learned of a prophecy that said he'd soon lose his goods. However, the prophecy came true. Zeus managed to dethrone him, and the age of the Titans and the great war between the Titans and the Olympians began. Now, the archetype Aquarius I call social engineering. An air sign is the image of the water bearer pouring knowledge, edification into the immeasurable cosmic mystic waters of Pisces, the two fishes. Aquarius is said to be scientific and humanitarian, some say revolutionary. Ancient authors added betrayers of opinion and truth. Plato suggested in the allegory of the cave, as commented by Jason Russo Giorgiani, the shadows of illusion, the waters or scientific manipulators standing on the planks above the prisoners, keeping us shackled inside the world of illusion. I suggest unlike current illusions of consumerism, the arc of the preposterous, the great mercurial illusion, biodata in the clouds. Power is now in the hands of data collection. Amazon, Alibaba, and of course now Elon Musk, and so on. Online giants, the great surveillance, as we've seen, inherent in China. Collection and storage is Saturn, and collection is the moon, and data is Mercury. Is science now replacing evolution by intelligent design? Evolution of the future is not by the gods of the sky, but by intelligent design by the gods of the clouds. Biodata, the most valuable resource on the planet. What happens when your data is hacked? To expand your understanding of Aquarius, the great, most of you might know this, the Greek mythology where Zeus flew down as an eagle and pinched the little cupbearer and took him up there as a slave. So this is the whole idea of Plato in the allegory of the cave and the shadow and the waters on the top, if you like, looking down, keeping us manipulated in a world of confusion, if you like. That's what's happening at the present moment. So getting to 2025 after my little talk. Hopefully you all enjoyed that little part of it. I'm just going to have a sip. Is there anything anyone would like to ask after that before I get into 2025? Okay. So 2025 planetary aspects I have up here, and don't we have a lot? January 3rd, we had Mars opposition to Pluto. These are the degrees that if you have in your charts or you are looking for notes to take or to understand. This is where the planetary energy is going to manifest the most this year. So we had Mars opposition Pluto on the 3rd of January. And of course, that 3rd of January is when the college votes were tallied. And on January the 30th, we had Uranus stationed at 23 degrees of Taurus, which is very interesting because, you know, we're in the Pleiadian, if you like, in the territory of Medusa. Once we get up into the 20 degrees of Taurus through to 25, 26 degrees of Taurus, we're into the Pleiades area, or into the Medusa, if you like, analogy of archetypes. And I've got something to say about that in a moment too. On February the 3rd, which was only 2 days ago, when Mr. Trump came out right on cue, we know that Jupiter is about justice, and we know that Jupiter is in America's chart, and we'll see all of that as we go along. However, Trump came out and suggested a Riviera-style resort on the Gaza Strip after 44,000 people have been killed. Whether, as I said before, politics, I'm not getting into it, just stating the facts. I'm not an Israeli, I'm not a Palestinian, I'm not anything. I'm just a time traveler on Earth presenting the facts as I see them. And so for me, you know, Jupiter stationed, and we have this interesting conversation. And then on the 23rd of February, we have Mars station, because Mars, of course, went retrograde back there in, I've got the chart there, back there in December, the 6th, I think it was. Mars retrograded to 6 degrees of Leo and has been going back over Leo, and now is at about 19 degrees of Cancer. And so it spends, Mars retrograde periods are roughly, depending on which sign it's in, because a lot of people don't understand that different signs allow planets to retrograde longer or shorter than others. But for Mars, it's generally about 70, roughly about 70 days. It can be 71, 72, or in Pisces, it's can be 63 days. So Mars has a long time. It usually spends 6 months in those two signs if it crosses a border, and which it did. So it went into the early degrees of Leo. It's gone all the way back into Cancer, and then it starts to go all the way back through Cancer and all the way back into Leo again. So it generally takes 4 months to start getting itself back to the Leo position again, and then it moves on. So it takes 6 months before it gets out of there. So what we're seeing is a Mars in Cancer, and Mars in Cancer is in its depression, or what modern astrologers call fall. So the whole idea is it's a moon sign. So the moon is about inclusion and what we include and collect, and they are impressions and they are emotions. So Mars in there escalates those things that are in us, and that's what we're seeing at the present time, above many other things, which we'll get to. So then Venus, of course, on the 2nd of March, Venus stations and goes retrograde at 10 degrees of Aries. Now, people call that detriment. I call it away from home, because I have a different way of expressing it. If a planet's home is in Libra and it's in Aries, then it has trouble accessing its resources. That's how we talk about it from a Hellenistic perspective. Some people call it detriment these days, but I don't know. Some of these English words are a little bit difficult to explain. So for me, it's away from home. And I've had experience with that personally myself with planets. And so we're going to have 40 days and 40 nights, because that's what Venus retrogrades at. And then on March the 15th, we have Mercury station and go retrograde again in Aries. And then on the 20th of March, we have the Sun ingress into Aries. And on March the 30th, we have Neptune crossing the border over a long period of time, spent its time in, it has 165 years or so that it does a cycle. So it hasn't been back there for 165 years. It's about to enter Aries again at 00 degrees. Hence, if you go back to my early presentation about that eclipse in 2015, the election and rise of Trump, and where we are right now. The story is very long to put together, but those that can follow it will understand where I'm going. And so then on April the 6th, Mercury stations direct at 26 degrees of Pisces, which happens to be Venus's exaltation degree. On the 12th of April, Mercury on the Mercury stations on the 6th of April direct, and then 6 days later on the 12th, Venus stations direct. Then on April the 27th, Mars direct opposition Pluto again. So we get different passes. Remember, when planets go retrograde, and if they're retrograding over outer planets or planets outside of from Mars outwards, the outer planets usually get 2 or 3 passes over it, because the planet will go back over, then go back over, and that's why we're going to get the Mars-Pluto opposition again. And that'll be at 3 degrees of Leo. On the 4th of May, we're going to have Pluto station retrograde at 3 degrees of Aquarius. Now, I've got some charts here to show you in a little while, but all of these are very significant, as you can see as you go along and have a little look at the degrees that are there. So Pluto will station retrograde, so it's going to go back and hit the border again. And as I said last year in my presentation, those that remember what I said that border issues were all going to be through 2024, which they were, because when you get major planets sitting on the cusp of entering a sign, going into the sign, coming back over the sign, into the sign it was in before, that's called they're anaretic degrees to start with. There's a word called anaretic degrees, but it's also, from a practical perspective, going over a border. And so you see all these border disputes that have been going on for quite some time. May the 25th, we have the Saturn ingress. Okay, May the 25th, Saturn goes into Aries. Woo! And we know that Saturn likes to do things slow. Going into a Mars-ruled sign where Mars will be the landlord, Saturn is going to have a little bit of an issue with that. We can go back 30 years and just we can see some of the things that are associated with the Saturn in Aries. My big line for Saturn in Aries is that Saturn rules governments and those that are in authority. And my big talk about that is that they will govern for themselves. That's an Aries trait. So all governments now that are elected now with the Saturn going into Aries will have government for themselves. They won't be worried about you or me. They will be worried about themselves, because that's what Aries is like. We all know that Aries likes to service itself. It likes to do things for itself. However, with Saturn in Aries, you want to do things fast, like you've just getting a sneak preview of. You like to go and sign a 300 pages of these little things that we show the world. When Saturn gets into Aries, it's going to be very interesting to see the repercussions of that, because we all know that Saturn lets you get away with things for a while. It lets you get away with things for quite some time, but then they don't call it the planet of karma for nothing. It comes back and gives you a little coronial, because if, as I said before, there you see that Kronos did to his father Uranus, and it wasn't nice. So on moving along, Jupiter also changes sign this year. So Jupiter goes into Cancer. And when it goes into Cancer, it's going to be exalted. And so therefore, any issues regarding justice, as far as Jupiter is concerned, will be emotionally charged, but standing for what it sees as rightful. From an emotional perspective, because it's going into Cancer, where it's exalted there. Because why is it exalted there? There's plenty of reasons why, but one of the bigger archetypal reasons for it is that Jupiter, being the god of the sky, now rains down, if you like, fertility. And that's what Cancer is. It's a very fertile. It's the first sign. It's fertility. It's water. It's sperm. It's the giver of life. So Jupiter's going in there. On June the 15th, Mars will square Uranus, and we know that Mars-Uranus squares aren't particularly nice, and that'll be at 28 degrees of Leo, and I hope I got that right. On 28 degrees of Leo, and Uranus will be at 28 degrees of Taurus, because 28 degrees of Leo is the comeback again president's ascendant. On June the 15th as well, Jupiter will square Saturn. June the 19th, we'll have Jupiter squaring Neptune. And on July the 4th, which is, of course, America's birthday, we'll have Neptune station and go retrograde. So it moves its way into Aries, gets to 2 degrees, and then stations and goes back for a little time again into crossing the border again. So this is also to do with Pisces and Aries. The idea of the Pisces thing that we've seen with Saturn in there, as I've said to people, you saw a lot of drownings happening while Saturn was in, and a lot of sea accidents while Saturn was in Pisces. But it's also refugees and people with a cultural tie. You know, this is Piscean energy. This is a tie to how I have my cultural interest and fanaticism tied to this Piscean energy that is there. And Saturn and Neptune chase each other, but they don't exactly conjunct this year. They get very close to it, but they don't conjunct. And we all know that the Saturn-Neptune, even though they're going to be about a degree away from each other, the words I use for that is reality versus illusion. Would probably be a good word to put in there. So you have Saturn as reality, and you have Neptune as the illusion, if you like. You know, I'm giving you some of the archetypal words that we use. We could say devotion. Neptune's also about devotion to something as well. And then July the 7th, Uranus changes signs, and Uranus goes into Gemini. And I said back in 2018 that I was really uncomfortable when I looked at the aspects back then of what was going to take place, and it's unfolding the way it has. And as I read out to you before, that when Jupiter goes into Uranus, it all seems to happen, and it's happened every time. There seems to be a war. A war of some sort. The word war can be used in different ways. We have a trade war just about happening now. So, you know, all of these things are very relevant, especially when we're talking about Uranus going into a Gemini-ruled, if you like, mutable sign, in the sense of it's double-bodied. It has Pollux and Castor, the two Roman boys, Romulus and Regulus, fighting each other for information. That's what Gemini is about. One side of Gemini brings in all the information and the other side disperses it. It's all about facts. It's fractional. It's great. There's some great things about it. When Uranus goes in there, Uranus isn't. That's why I have a little bit of problem with Uranus. It has a stewardship, if you like, or has similarities to Aquarius revolutionary parts of it, but it has nothing to do with that because it's such an unstable planet. As you can see, it's conjunct the current president's son, and we can see and the node, the dragon, the dragon's head. We can see the way these things come out. On the 13th of July, Saturn in Aries will then station retrograde. It's going to go back into Pisces again. So again, we're going to have this seesawing effect all the time this year. That's why I said, can you hold on or can you let go? This is a 9-year. It's a snake. It's all about trying to if we could think about ourselves in a way of being able to just be calm for a moment and not to react, because that's where we feel we may fall down if we react. It's one of those let go, hold on, let go, hold on. We just need to be in the present with a 9. A 9 can be a very spiritual number. The Pythagoreans saw it as an incredible number, and so if we invest our consciousness into understanding that all that is going on around us, we take care of our own moment and have our own moment in time, we can at least find some safety in it, the consciousness of ourselves, rather than the external noise that's going on around us. And so July the 18th, Mercury stations retrograde again, and this time it's going to station at 15 degrees of Leo. So Leo gets a bit of a bashing this year with Mars and then Mercury as well. And then on August the 9th, Mars will be opposition to Saturn, a retrograde Saturn in Aries. So that's interesting because that's very close to the equatorial, the vernal equinoxes and the winter equinoxes as well. So anything to do with 0 degrees of Aries, 0 degrees of Cancer, 0 degrees of Libra, 0 degrees of Capricorn, they're called the cardinal zeros. They are the crosses, if you like, of our world as far as we see it, and the way that planets infiltrate with their archetypes. So anything to do with energy that is there is also very, if you like, penetrative. So we'll see that Mars-Saturn opposition on August the 9th. And then August the 9th as well, within that same day, we have Mars in opposition to Neptune, because Neptune and Saturn are very close together. They're not partile conjunct, but they're conjunct with each other. They're adherents to each other. They're no more than 2 degrees, 3 degrees away from each other for the whole year, just clamoring to each other, but not actually going. Saturn doesn't go past Neptune until next year. So on that same day, we have the Mars-Saturn opposition and we have the Mars-Neptune opposition. And then on August the 10th, we have Mercury station direct. September, we have Saturn regress. In other words, it goes over the border. On September the 1st, it goes back into 2959 of Pisces. And then on September the 4th, we have Mars square Jupiter. September the 6th, we have Uranus station at 1 degree of Gemini and go back into Taurus with unfinished business again. So you can see Neptune, Saturn, Pluto, and Uranus will all be going backwards and forwards over borders, including Mars. And so again, we have this dynamic of going backwards and forwards over the tops of the borders. Planets are preparing themselves for long stays in new signs, which is always something to look for, to where that archetypal energy is being, we're getting a vision of it now, or of where it's going to be born. And then October the 13th, we have Pluto station direct. So it goes back to Pluto's now in Aquarius for the next 20 years or so. And so we have Pluto station direct on October the 13th. And then October the 22nd, we have Neptune go over the border into Pisces. So it goes back at 2959, back over that spot that I showed you earlier on. And then November the 4th, we have Mars conjunct Uranus. Mars opposition Uranus in Gemini. And so that's at 00 degrees of Gemini. On November the 8th at 29 degrees of Taurus, we have Uranus retrograde regress. So that's Uranus going back into Taurus at 2959. And then on November the 9th, we have Mercury station retrograde conjunct Mars at 6 degrees of Leo. And those that have a sharp memory will remember that on the 6th of December 2024, Mars stationed retrograde at 6 degrees of Leo. Why is that significant? Well, 6 degrees of Leo is, of course, the North Node of America, which sits in the 9th house of America in whole sign charts. And then on the 11th of November, we have Jupiter station retrograde at 25 degrees of Cancer. Jupiter goes into signs, moves along really quick, stops, goes all the way back again, then stops, and then goes all the way back again. So very, if you like, erratic movements also by the planets this year. So the 27th of November, we have Saturn station direct at 25 degrees of Pisces. So from 24 degrees of Pisces through to Aries, we're going to, the planets are going to move over those degrees. So if you've got planets there, you're going to see a lot of action. And remember also, I haven't included them here because far too much to give to you. There are eclipses at 23 degrees of Pisces, at 23 degrees of a lunar eclipse at 23 degrees of Virgo in March. And so, when we get within 18 degrees either side of the nodes, we have eclipses. So you're going to have eclipses slipping out of the Aries eclipses, Aries and Libra eclipses, and they'll be going into the Pisces and the Virgo axis. And so that will also tell us, because the nodes and the eclipses work hand in hand, where and how things will turn out for the collective. It'll start to infiltrate through. November the 28th, we have Mercury station direct. And then December the 8th, we have Mars square Saturn at that 25 degrees of Sagittarius and Pisces. December the 29th, we have Neptune station direct at 29 of Pisces. So it's going to, by the end of the year, it's going to start to go into find itself a home in Aries, but we're going to get a taste of it all this year. And then on the 14th, at 29 degrees, of course, we'll have 29 Sagittarius, Mars will square Neptune. They're all the aspects for this year. Now, we'll just have a breather for a second. If there anyone, any comments anyone would like to say, and we can start to look at a few charts.
Yeah, we've got some questions, Greg, in the room.
Yeah,
Yeah, you were mentioning when a planet crosses the ecliptic, does it get energized because it's basically just following the path of the sun?
well, it's not. Yeah, it's not following the path of the sun, but what it's doing is it's plane. So if you can imagine a planet going around the sun, it has a plane, at least a tail, imaginary line that goes over the ecliptic. All the energy of that planet is released there because the central hub of this solar system that we live in is the sun. And in astrology, we talk about the sun as what we select, what we choose. And so planets that go, their nodal positions, planets' nodal positions crossing over the ecliptic do release energy. And the degree that they cross over, think of it like an eclipse. When there's an eclipse, it's exactly the same thing that happens. The moon is on the ecliptic with the sun. That's why you get an eclipse. And so with the idea of the node, I like to say it releases the energy or the archetype. It releases the archetype, and then the archetype starts to infiltrate. And different charts of different people at different times, nations, the whole gamut of what we see of organic life on this earth begins to manifest part and parcel of that has left its residence, if you like, on the ecliptic. Does that make sense?
That's good, thank you.
And as I said, if it's a south node, then it's going into familiar territory. So it's coming down from the north, crosses over the ecliptic, and then starts to head south. Now, this takes for Pluto, over 80 years, 90 years. Planets, the moon does this in a month. Mercury does it in its 88 days. And so each planet has a different time frame set to it as well. Different signs. So the signs have archetypes attached to them as well. The signs themselves in that context give you the information about how the planet that is going over on its node. So when we see in basic astrology, when we see the moon conjunct the south node or Mercury conjunct the south node, we have little notations where we say something. We have a phrase where we say something, don't we? And they're not necessarily positific. They're more habitual. They're our habits, familiar territory. It's somewhere where we've been. Anyone that spent a long time in astrology and studying in charts will see that south node connections can always be challenging, is the word. Okay, so has anybody else got anything? All right, we'll get on and see a couple of charts now. I noticed, because I don't spend time on the social medias anymore, I'm sorry about that, but I just don't have time to be able to do all that stuff anymore, but I'm here. The 47th President of the United States, and I noticed people were just saying 12 o'clock. I timed it, I saw it, I watched it. It was 12:01 and 58 seconds. That's when he took the oath from the judge that he appointed. And so this is the chart for the inauguration of Donald Trump. And in mundane astrology, when the sun is at 053, about to crash into Pluto, we call it a Sun-Pluto conjunction. And all of us in astrology, those that haven't spent a long period of time in astrology, just to familiarize yourself with the idea of what Pluto is, evolutionary astrologers talk of Pluto as transformation. From my experience, because it's all anecdotal, but and subjective, but if we go back into the myths and mythology of Hades and we look at where Pluto is today and the rise of Pluto and where Pluto's been, as I said before, it didn't come into consciousness or wasn't brought into consciousness until it visually got discovered with the aid of an eyepiece. we can't see it with our own eyes, remember? So this is all illusionary stuff. There's a whole philosophy that surrounds all of our astrology, and it's a lot deeper than we like to give credit to it for. And there's a lot of astronomy tied up in it. However, Pluto itself, in a nations chart, mundane nations chart, I think Mr. President Trump gave us a vocal on what that meant. That was, I nearly fell off my chair when he said, I'm going to be a dictator from day one. Well, the aristocracy, if you like, or the how can I say it? I'm going to take complete control of everything that is around me, and everything that anybody says, I'm not going to even bother with, because I've got supreme power. That's when I saw the timing of the chart, and when I saw that, which I looked at many years previous to write my articles, I said we're in for changing times, coupled with everything else that we've seen. This is his 4 years, if you like. And the government is ruled by the 10th house, and his cronies, or what you would call his associated friends, the GOP, is the 11th house, and the Democrats and all opposition is the 6th house. And you can see the moon in Libra there at 18 degrees via the combustor, in a lonely house for the moon in the 6th house. So democracy itself will be taken over by the fact that Venus is exalted with Saturn in between, wedged between Saturn and Neptune, and the node up there in the 11th house. So your democracy is going to run into some problems. And with Uranus rising on the ascendant. Oh, just by the way, last year, 4 years ago, did you guys see Biden's chart for that? I think I put that up. That had Mars on the ascendant. Well, it was pretty much a Mars-ruled time for Biden, like it turned into riots and went on for ages and ages. Anyway, the thing to see here is that Mars is conjunct the IC, the 4th house here on the chart. Well, it's 3rd house, but it's on the IC, so it's going to be a lot of 3rd house, 4th house issues right down here in the deep. Mars on the IC, that close to the IC, with is definitely going to be one to watch. And you can see it square the moon. So the ideals of democracy versus the Mars down here in the 3rd house, you're gonna, and of course, if you see the moon here, it's square the Mercury up here, and so that's the 9th house. You're going to see a lot of action going on, and Mars rules the 7th house, and 7th house is our disputes and legal disputes. So to see the 3rd, 6th, and 9th in action there, you're going to see a lot of court action. That would be my understanding of it. And that Mars is conjunct the fixed star Pollux, which was the boxer. So the archetype there is very much of the boxer. And you can see over here, hopefully you can see this, I don't know if you can read it or not, this little couple of pink signs here. This is Mercury out of bounds, and this is Mars out of bounds. And the idea of an out-of-bound planet is you only have to look at the current face that you have on the screen there, Donald Trump's. He has his Mercury, and any planet that's in Gemini or Cancer or Sagittarius or Capricorn, very close to the axis of those will potentially be out of bounds, because that's the way solstice planets work in astronomy. So an out-of-bound planet is someone that is not socially in touch with, or says or acts different to what the society or the norm of the collective society believes. And I think we're pretty much seeing that in action. So we're going to see a lot more of it. Okay. And as you can see here, this is I'm using the US chart. here, 4th of July at 15:10. It's the one that most people use. There's lots of charts you can use for nations. Most of them use the Sibley chart. The solar return for up until the 4th of July 2025 is this chart here. I missed something when I was doing the panel for the election of Trump. So I missed something. I didn't get enough time. It was all a bit confusing. But what I wanted to point out is the solar return of the Sibley chart had Trump's Mars at 26 degrees on the midheaven here. It's very close to the midheaven here, but it's in the 9th house here, which really does emphasize a few things that are going on with Trump. And you're going to see a lot of 9th house issues this year. A lot of 9th house issues. I'll tell you why in a minute. Okay, so this is the US Sibley chart, Donald Trump's chart, and the solar return chart. And as you can see here, the MC of the Sibley chart, solar return, has the MC at 26 of Leo, right over the top of Trump's Mars. So that's really, really powerful. And you can see here that Trump's sun sits on America's Mars. Well, that's just typical of the rhetoric we see, Gemini, in the country. It's divided. It's Gemini. Some in the country like him, some in the country don't like him. And that's typical when a sun conjuncts the Mars. Example of that was Kevin Rudd's sun conjuncts Australia's Gwen Stoney chart, 1901 chart. Rudd's sun conjuncts Australia's Mars. And he was a very divisional person. And what happened? It all fell apart. So this is how it all works from a mundane perspective. When you're looking at charts, you understand that Mars divides. You use the archetypes to give you the key into what you're understanding. When you see planets conjunct and MCs on tops of Mars, suns on Mars, you see the energy and you describe it like the Leo energy is out there. It's right out there. And it's fixed. It's hard to move. It's fixed. It's hot. We talk about, when we're doing this sort of stuff, we're talking about what the signs are, their temperaments, what they are. Are they fixed? Are they solid? Are they movable? Are they quick like cardinal signs and they give up? They flash and then they die down. Or they're mutables and take 45 years to get to where they want to get to. I'm going to the party, but I'm not going to be there for a few. The party starts at 8 o'clock. Well, I arrive at 5 to 12 at midnight. That's how we would see mutable signs, versatile double-bodied signs work. As I said, cardinals are flashes. So let's move on. So the US Sibley chart, as we saw last year on the 25th of November, Mercury station retrograde. And you can see that the Mars is nearly over the node here. And there's some very interesting aspects to look at. I'm not going to go through everything minutely, but only wanted to point out that these particular charts led to where we are now. And then we had Mars station retrograde on the 6th of December, as I mentioned. And you can see here, it's over the top of the node, on the North Node. Now, Mars on the node, we all know the node brings, it's kind of like a meeting place because the node is the ecliptic, right? You asked a question there before, and the idea is that the ecliptic is the path of the sun as viewed from the Earth. It's actually the path or the plane of the Earth going around the sun. And of course, we're tumbling at 1,037 miles per hour, and we're going in our revolution around the sun at 63,000 miles per hour. So this is all movement. And when we look from Earth, and this is what we're seeing on a one-dimensional chart, which turns into a three-dimensional chart when you look at it from my perspective, you go into it and you see that the Mars is stationed on the node in the 9th house. And it's gone back, of course, into Cancer. 8th house. What's the 8th house? I didn't put that up there for you. You guys had it there before. I'll dig it up a little bit later. But you know, the 8th house is treasury, taxes. The 9th house is trade. You know, so what are we seeing? Trade wars. This is Mars dividing, bullying in Mars in Leo, going back into Cancer, into the 8th house, which is taxes, which is all the things that we're seeing at the present time that are manufacturing out there in the collective. And I'm sorry if I'm only focusing at the moment on the US, but it seems to be the story that everybody's looking at the present time. And then moving forward, we had the Capricorn ingress on the 21st of December, and that kind of brings us the whole idea of the ingress of the sun, the cardinals and the equatorials, when the sun enters them, the energy then lasts for a particular period of time. So from the 21st of December till the 20th of March this year, we're under this particular chart this is in the US. We could particularly use that for any of our charts, nation, cities, and whatever else, even in our own chart. But as you can see here, on this ingress, the moon is in opposition, direct partile opposition to Saturn. So moon opposition Saturn. And we have a retrograde Jupiter sitting over the Americas descendant. And we have the Mars up here and the moon in opposition, the transiting moon of the ingress against Saturn. And so that's 10th house, 4th house. So these are all of the flavors of what we've seen, and that's leading us in, you know, and you can even take that into the Californian fires and to what's happened in America at the present time. They've had 1 million disasters since that Capricorn ingress, you know, disaster after disaster. It's never good when you have the moon opposition in Virgo to Pisces, Saturn moon opposition. It's a difficult aspect to work with. And of course, you throw in Mercury at 8 degrees of Sagittarius and that Uranus at 8:55, nearly 9 degrees of Gemini, Mercury opposition to Uranus. So the voice of disruption. Could we say that? Okay, so then I just wanted to put Donald Trump's chart up on the Americas chart to show you all why, and as I explained before to you, that Donald Trump's sun sits over the Americas' natal Mars, and his Uranus and his node is tied in there as well. Very dynamic, and that's why he's changing things. And you can see he's Saturn and his Venus also. So his Saturn sits over the top of the Mercury. So the US Mercury and Donald Trump's Saturn is there. So there's a whole, and the Mercury over the Jupiter, there's a whole tie-in here for Trump into the chart, which you would expect to see if in a particular this particular individual, as we've seen the way that some of the comments that have come out and the actions that have been foresaid. What I want to point out to a lot of people and those that were at the presentation for AA New South Wales, I didn't get to talk too much about this, but this is the zodiacal releasing, which is a Hellenistic mode of understanding, a bit like if those are in Vedic astrology, they're like dashas. They let you know what planetary mode is operating for a certain period of time. If we come over here and cast our eye over here, level 1, these are the main operations. So, and it's all on the planetary revolutions around the sun. So we have Pisces ruled by Jupiter, so it's 12 years. Mars is 8 years. Mars is 15 years. Venus is 8 years. Gemini is 20 years because Mercury's synodic cycle is 20 years when it comes back to itself with the sun, the same position. And then Cancer, which is the moon, is 25 years. He's been under that since he was born. So, you know, from 1980 through to August 2000, he was under Gemini. And then he went into the moon from 29th of August 2000. He's been under the moon. Now, his moon, as I said before, is a lunar eclipse moon. It's in the 5th house in Sagittarius. That's where he's been. His main ruler has, if you like, it's the zodiacal releasing pushes us to where our potential journey on this earth takes us, because these are the lot of spirit and the lot of this. That's where this is taken from. The lot of spirit, and the lot of fortune. Fortune is moon. They're both associated with showing us a pathway for our life. And so on the 20th of April this year, he's been 25 years under the moon. On the 20th of April this year, his long-term ruler will go into Leo. And Leo is his ascendant, his rising sign. And he has Mars in there as well. And so it's going to be pretty dynamic up until it doesn't, his second level change doesn't come until November the 11th, 2026. So he's going to have quite a period of time with all of this Leo energy at manifesting, whilst Saturn goes into Aries and Neptune goes into Aries. So there's a lot of fire and a lot of air, because remember that Jupiter's in Gemini at the moment, and then Jupiter will go into the water, but then Uranus is going to make an appearance into the air sign as well. So over this period of time, you're going to have a lot of fire and air floating around, which is going to be very dynamic. So watch from the 20th of April this year onwards, watch the dynamics unfold with Trump, because I'm really interested to see how this will play out.
The Pacific Palisades, one of the wealthiest communities in the U.S., is experiencing the worst fire in its history. Situated at the foothills of the Santa Monica Mountains, the Palisades typically escape damage as Santa Ana winds blow past, since the winds will usually blow any fire up to the north. However, this time, hurricane-force winds drove the flames directly into the neighborhood, reducing many homes to ashes. On January 7th, around 10:20 a.m. local time, a live camera with Alert California, a UC San Diego program to monitor wildfires and disasters in real time, picks up smoke rising. This is the first sighting of the Palisades fire. 6 minutes later, Plane Spotter at LAX catches first plumes of smoke on its live stream.
Okay, so we have a time, thanks to the Californian government webs. California fires, 7th of January 2025 at 10:20 a.m. in California. So that's the chart, and I have a Californian chart here from Nick Campion's World Horoscopes, I believe it's from. I can't remember if I got it from there or where I got it from, but I think pretty sure the data's pretty good. 9th of September 1850 in San Jose, California, 9:38 a.m. local mean time, which was 8 hours, 7 minutes and 35 seconds. That's the data for the state of California, and that's the event chart for the fire, the event chart for the fire against the natal chart of California. So for those that wanted to do any more research, we are the Sydney Astrological Research Society afterwards. And we can see here that the moon at that moment in time, and Chiron, I've got something to say about Chiron. I don't know if I'm going to have enough time, but Chiron going through Aries is always difficult because it's outside of Saturn in its orbit, and touches onto Uranus in its orbit. So and it's conjunct, Chiron conjunct Saturn, the moon conjunct sitting right on the Jupiter, on the Pluto and the Uranus in the 6th house in the fire sign of Aries, with Mars up here, the ruler in Cancer retrograde, just came out of Leo and retrograded the day to, I think it was the day before. So that's very powerful as well. So I just thought I'd point that out and show you the Californian fires so that you can go along and do your own research for that. That's the event chart for it, the actual event chart. And as you can see, Saturn is rising. And we have the wind, the lord of wind, Mercury, wings, wind. Of course, Mercury is the lord of wings and wind as well, at 29 degrees there in the midheaven in Sagittarius. Okay, so moving along. That's the ingress chart for Capricorn, for the Capricorn ingress chart for Washington, D.C. So that sort of keeps us in progress until the 20th of March this year. And as you can see, Mars is up here in the 10th house in Leo, and we have the 11th house, 5th house, and the 11th house is also the Congress, the lower house, and the Senate is the 5th house. So we have the moon in opposition to Saturn, and hence the all the Senate confirmations of all these particular individuals that Trump has put in to do his work for him. And you might see that Mercury's down here at 8 degrees of Sagittarius as well. And of course, 8 degrees of Sagittarius is pretty close to Antares, fixed star Antares. So then we move along to the American Airlines flight, collided midair on January the 29th at 8:47:57. That was the time given from all reports. And you can see that the Sibley chart, the America chart, the Mars was over the Mercury at that time. And there's a lot more going on here that I could point out to you with this particular chart, but I want to move on because we are losing time, and we'll move on, look at a couple more of this, and then we'll get on to Israel and to some other interesting charts that we have there. Interesting to know that the new moon on January the 29th, and of course we saw the accident happen just after the moon, and of course Mercury is also combust. It's heading now the next period of time, couple of weeks, it's going to a superior conjunction. So it's what we call combust at the moment. So that's also very interesting from that perspective. And you can see this lineup of Pisces here, the Saturn, the descendant of the chart, the Venus, the Neptune, and of course it was a female pilot who was at the helm of the helicopter. And then we also had Trump's, I got my little notes here, we had Trump's little idea of the diversity, equity, inclusion, where he came out and said that anybody that is could be associated with diversity, equity, inclusion doesn't have enough brains. They don't have. That's what his comment was. You don't have brains. You're not smart enough. So there you go. Not my words, his words. And the interesting thing is that the new moon on the 29th of January, or the same day, was, of course, at 9 degrees of Aquarius. 9 degrees, if you remember, the US chart has 9 degrees, virtually 8:55, 9 degrees with the Uranus. So there was a full trine there to that particular chart. And of course, Mercury was conjunct, and that's Mercury. As I said, Mercury was combust within period. It's closest to the sun, so it gets into the shadow of the sun, so we call it combust. It was conjunct the fixed star Altar, and Altar is the eagle, the US national bird. So there's a whole lot of series of, if you like, archetypal phrases that tie in here as well with this accident. And it was the day, the new moon was the day, and this is for Washington, and that's where the plane came down, the day of Mercury and the hour of Mercury, and Mars still was conjunct Castor. So if you wanted to study those, and Mars is still out of bounds. The military helicopter could be described as Mars Mercury. The military is Mercury, and Mercury is the wings or any flying object. The American Airlines departed from Wichita in Kansas, and that chart here was for 6:39, and I've got it on Eastern time here. So if you're going to use this chart, make sure you use Eastern time and not Central time. There's an hour difference between Central time and Eastern time. 6:39 Eastern time. That's the chart for the takeoff of the aeroplane. So you can see 8 degrees of Leo rising, and you can see the sun sitting on the descendant over there with the Mercury. So that's the flight chart. I'll give you that data there, and of course Mars is at 26 degrees, or declination is 26 degrees. So Earth's axial plane is 2336. So when planets go outside of our declination plane, in other words, when they leave the Earth's plane, if you like, and go out of bounds, the description we use is out of bounds, that's a long way out. That's this is the actual chart for it, for the 8:47 PM of the air traffic controllers. This is the data that was given by the US for the, I've got it up there so you can, if you're recording this or you get it up later, you can go over it. But that's the particular chart for the 29th of January at 8:47:57, the exact moment that the Black Hawk collided with the American airline. So we have disasters after disasters in America. We had the floods, we had the fires, we've had disaster after disaster. You have a look at those ingresses, and it's not hard to see that from a mundane perspective, they were challenged. Okay, can I just have a break for a moment and just have a sip? Any questions before we get on to Israel and the rest? It's kind of, I'm going to open it up now. If anyone wants to ask questions, if you like, Ben, if you can unmute people as they want to say something, and we'll sort of go over things. I've got the proclamation chart for Israel. I'm using the one of 437, which is the one that most astrologers use. 4 o'clock was 4 p.m. Was the 1600 was the moment that Israel began the independence, but Guren didn't finish until 437, when he proclaimed Israel as Israel has stood up and rised. So this is the chart we use for Israel, the 14th of May 1948, 4:37 EED time, -2 hours. In Tel Aviv in Israel. And as you can see, power punched Leo 10th house and MC. And as you record from what I've shown you there, Mars station retrograde in their 10th house in December. And so it's been ongoing stuff been going on. Okay, so I've opened it up. Does anybody want to make any comments before we go any further?
Oh, Greg, hi. I just a small question. When you were referring to the swearing-in chart for Trump,
yep,
you actually take it from the beginning of the speech, the actual oath, or the end of the whole oath?
When he says, when he puts his hand up and says the rest of it, and then the judge goes, yeah, fine. So basically at the end, because that's the official moment that he becomes president. He doesn't become president while he's saying the oath. He becomes president when he's finished the oath.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Just checking. Thank you.
No worries. That's what I think anyway. Others might argue differently, but that's what I think.
I feel the same. I just was wondering.
Okay. Anyone else got anything? You want to say anything, or you're happy to go with where we are?
It's great, mate.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's great. I think that room's till about 9, just to give you a.
Yep. Yeah, cool, mate. Yeah, we can get through this.
Me too.
We'll be done by then. All right, so we got the Israel's proclamation chart for the 14th of May at 4:47 p.m. And this is the solar return chart, 14th of May, 2024. So have a look at the moon. Moon's at 6 degrees, Leo. Anyone want to tell me what was at 6 degrees of Leo on the 6th of March, 6th of December 2024? Mars retrograded, remember? Mars stationed retrograde on the 24th. So this ongoing thing that's going on with Israel at the present time is just full on. And of course, Leo is a sun ruled. So have a look at the Israel sun. Who knows what's at 23 degrees, 23 degrees of Taurus at the moment? Be passing backwards and forwards over that degree.
Uranus.
Yeah, Uranus. So, and it's squaring all this stuff up here. So in the 10th house. And the 7th house is how we deal with other people, other nations, other people. So that's really interesting. Look where Pluto is. Pluto's on their IC. Yeah, it all, and you can see here that the Mars is down here making a trine up here to the 10th. Now the 6th house in mundane astrology is armed forces. Okay, military is Mars. There's a bit of Saturn there when you're talking about the combined part of it, but most military is Mars. Generals are Jupiter, Mars. But the Mars to the 10th house out of the 6th house of armed forces shows you what has been going on and what we have seen and witnessed across this period of time. And isn't it very interesting that we have Russia doing one thing all over the world, and then you have Israel doing the other thing all over the world? I'm not saying everybody's right or wrong. I wash my hands of all of that. But you can easily see from an astrological mundane perspective that these things do show up. Archetypes, if you can understand how the archetypes work, the archetypes are there telling us the story. And it's just there for us to write the story. We can use objective astronomical data to subjectively write our sentences out, our dialogue out, or tell our story. And we tell our story by understanding the signs, how the planets are positioned in the signs, whether they have power to do things in those signs, or the houses they're in. And this gives us all and feeds all this data. That's why it takes time to write material, to make it coherent and for us to understand. Okay, let's move on. This is the Israel solar return for this year, when apparently they're going to make a high-rise beach international frontage of Gaza. So you can see the Mars over Pluto. up here. The Pluto and the Saturn. This is their 14th of May. That's why I said watch what happens in April when all these things start to make their way. Saturn then goes in May, remember, into Aries. The story is here for us to explore what I often have trouble understanding what I'm supposed to be doing. I can see all this stuff and people ask me things, but I can't do anything about it. It's like when clients come to me and say, I'm sick, am I going to get better? Well, I'm not a doctor, I can't help you, but I can explain what the weather may be like. And looking at this chart here to see how the weather's going to go, you can see that Mars is trining, or the moon is trining Mars, and the moon is also in an aspect of grand trine to Venus. There's some very telling signs here of a lot of Mars energy and a lot of fire. Okay, the formation of Russia. This is the chart that the Russian astrologer Silmajana Gavarenka, I can't pronounce the Russian. It's the one that she uses. There's different charts for different nations from different places. Apparently this is the one they use, which is just prior to the Winter Palace chart. So the 30th December 1922. There's no timing for it. It's a 12 p.m. chart, and it's EED 2 hours in Moscow in Russia. So that's the Russian chart if you're going to be doing things. And have a look where their moon is. So the Uranus has been sitting over the top of their natal moon. And it's been very interesting. And you can see here that all of this Pisces stuff here that we spoke about before, where Saturn has been and where Neptune has been, and all the planets will go through, and we have the eclipses here as well, is all in this Pisces. They have a Mars-Uranus conjunction. So that'll be very interesting to see where Russia ends up. And of course, they've got their Jupiter in Scorpio on the descendant. The solar return chart for from the 29th of December 2024 through to 2025. So this is their solar return for the year. And you can see that I was talking about, there's the Saturn over the Mars and the Uranus. That's their solar return chart. And you can see that the Mars is in opposition retrograde to Pluto. Don't need to tell you about Mars Plutos, especially when you have Pluto in Aquarius and Mars in Leo. And you also have the Jupiter retrograde in Gemini, opposition to the Mercury and the Moon. So all of these aspects that I spoke about before, this is the aspects, those aspects will be included on top of their solar returns. So this is how we do prognostication, if you like, for mundane astrology. And here we get to Mr. Elon Musk, who poked his little head up there just recently. Elon Musk's chart. Now, isn't it interesting, made in Australia and get rid of the migrants? Oh, he was born in Pretoria, South Africa. He's Donald Trump's right-hand man. And his wife doesn't particularly come from America either. So it's very interesting, the rhetoric that some of these people use. I'm not saying anything other than saying exactly what's been said. Now, his time is conflicting. It's a B rating, but it's from a biography. And astro.com, Astrodata, which is probably the best reliable source, does have it at 7:30. So that's the best we can do for his chart. It seems pretty good, based on the fact that the ascendant is conjunct the America Sun. Remember, he's been invited into the White House, and he's been given access to the Treasury, as well as lots of, what else was he given access to? I wrote it down here somewhere. Oh, the Department of International Trade and Treasury. So he's given 30 days access to all the data. Get out, I'm going to record all that data. Wonderful. This is the man. Now, why I have Inside Treasury is that, oh, that's the end of my show. But if you go back to the Americas chart, we go back up here to the US chart. You can see the US chart here on the inside is 13 degrees is of Cancer is their sun, and 5 degrees is Jupiter, and 3 degrees is Venus, all in the 8th house. So 8th house is Treasury, in the sense the 2nd house is, but other people's money and trade is the 8th house. So we have Mr. Elon Musk. His sun is conjunct the Jupiter of America. His ascendant is conjunct the sun, and his Mercury sits on the America's sun as well. So he's a voice into the ear of the president. It's wonderful when you see some of this stuff, the way it works out. So that's Muskie's chart anyway. So guys, that's the end of the show. So I'm open for questions and whatever else.
That was brilliant, mate.
Is that okay?
So good. So good. Thank you. That was amazing.
Thank you.
That was
There's
brilliant. Amazing.
a lot more stuff I could say, like, you know, the DRC in Congo and I didn't do the Australian election either, because we got the Australian election coming up as well, but you can take it from those charts and the aspects that I showed you there, how the election in Australia is going to go as well.
Maybe you'll have to do another night for us, Greg.
Yeah, I could do that, man. I'm retired, but I have a space for Sydney Astrology.
Yeah, we've all got a soft spot for Sydney.
I got my Tassie Devil shirt on today. Look,
Oh, yes. Guitar player.
Tassie rocks. Even though I'm on the north coast of New South Wales.
Isn't 14 degrees of Cancer the fixed star Sirius?
It certainly is, and that's
Yes.
exactly what Elon Musk has his Mercury on.
Bloody stunning. Bloody stunning.
And not only that, you know what's exalted at 15 degrees of Cancer?
I don't.
Jupiter.
Jupiter, of course, yes.
Yeah, and that's why America's chart's really strong as well, you know.
Oh,
It's uplifted. It's got an exalted Jupiter, even though it's combust in the 8th house. It's exalted, and it has an exalted Saturn in the 11th house as well. So, you know, it's a very strong, powerful country.
the brightest star in the sky, Sirius.
Yep,
The
that's
brightest.
it. Okay, questions, answers, opinions?
Well, with what you've been saying about Trump's chart in America and everything, it looks as though there's not going to be much to stop him.
No, except for that Saturn.
Plans.
Except for that Saturn, you know, it's going to be, as I said before, it takes a long time for Saturn to give its karma. So let's see how that works out. As I said before, I'm also, I can't say some things that I like to say. Not terrible things, not things that are inappropriate, but things that I can't disclose, you know, because this is worldwide. I can't disclose some things about that I see in Trump's chart, but at the same time, I'm going to be really interested to see how things go from the 20th of March onwards, because there was also a lot of conflict about Trump's chart when it first came out. You know, 29 degrees on the fixed star Regulus, And of course, with Mars there, and the typical word we use for Mars in Leo conjunct the fixed star Regulus is a military leader. So yeah.
King is the word I would use. King.
No, dictator.
Oh.
Dictator, that's what he wants to be.
I think
well, his chart's not a dictator chart, but it is for his swearing in.
I don't see any reason to think of Regulus as unattractive or ugly. I prefer the word king, a regal appointment.
Yep.
Yeah, and why do you say military, Greg, for Regulus?
Oh, because that Regulus is always been a from the I'm not going to go into the great long story of it, but if you look up any star book or go on the net or anything else, you'll see that military power is associated with Regulus. Regulus is one of the watchers, of course, and watcher, the watcher of the north. Aldebaran's the watcher of the east. The watcher of the south, of course, is Antares, and Fomalhaut, which is in Aquarius, or now in Pisces. So they're the four fixed stars, the main stars, or the Persian stars as they call them. But Regulus has always been tied up. I think Bernadette Brady's, I got on my shelf up there, I've got every book you can think of. Brady's Fixed Stars up there. I think she speaks about Regulus as being the military star, but the star Regulus, if you do wrong, it comes back and bites you in the ass. It's interesting, fixed stars have to be, and I've taught this in all of my classes, fixed stars have to be within 1 degree. I don't have this. Yeah, I'll be lenient on the big stars like Regulus and say maybe 2 if it's, prominent. But they're portals. Remember what I said at the beginning there, 14 billion years ago, we had this thing where gas was made in an explosion, and we had what scientists inform us was the Big Bang. And so stars form from there, and our solar system, 4.5 billion years ago, started forming. It's a star. Well, all those other stars, or when we look up in the sky, we're looking back millions of years. That light may not even be there now. It's hard to imagine that. So it's a portal of light, and they have witnessed the goings on this planet. I can't explain any more than to say organic life here on this planet. All where we've looked, and as much as we looked, we haven't found any extraterrestrial external life. We're on a blue planet, and this blue planet, as I gave you at the beginning, is at the doomsday moment. Ooh. It's 89 seconds to go. It started in 1940s or late 40s at 7 minutes. It's now at 89 seconds. There's no denying that the planet is 1.5 degrees hotter than it was industrial. So in the 1800s, it was 1.5 degrees cooler than what it is now. And I don't go with conspiracies or whatever else. I'm speaking scientific fact. And we're in a position at the present moment where all of that is being disregarded. And I said this when I wrote in my article, 2020 and the Fourth Way, I called it, allegorically wrote about the fact that we're going into the 2020 decades. And the 2020s was the moment in time when humans were given a moment to shift the dynamic, to take on the dynamic. And we are people represented by the moon, that's democracy. And the little bit that I wrote about consumerism and the falsehoods of what has happened at the moment, with information and the way that it's distributed across the world and what we see, and the phrases of cost of living and all this sort of stuff and everything else, and the manipulation that is going on to avoid the facts and to avoid what is the picture of reality at the moment. This presentation might be forceful and it might be opinionated, but it's telling the truth. We're at a moment in time that is very difficult and challenging, and we're not meeting that challenges. We're voting in dictators. It's crazy. I'll say nothing now. You had your hand up there, bud.
Yeah. There was one chart, and I can't remember if it was the U.S. chart or it was an overlay chart. And the only upside that I saw was you had the North Node in the 6th house, but I'm not certain which chart that was.
Oh, okay. I wouldn't call the 6th house an up chart, an up position. The 6th house is a difficult chart. In any chart, the 12th house and 6th house are always challenging houses. Reason being is they're not on the angles, so you can't get things done. It's difficult. When I talk to people about the 12th house and the 3rd house, they're places that people don't join in their social community. So they're activists within the local neighbourhood, and they tend to do a lot of work behind the scenes. But it's only when you get the 2nd house and the 1st house. 1st house is leaders, 11th house as well. They're leaders, on the pivots. They're, even the Barack Obama, 7th house sun. If you've got a planet, a strong planet on the angles, then they're going to be noticeable and they're going to change the world. You're not going to change the world out of a cadent house. You're going to talk about it. You're going to be good about it, but you're not going to get out of that house, because from my understanding and of the way that the production of a planet to get on and do its business comes from the terrestrial placement of that planet, and that's houses.
I was thinking of the 6th more from maintenance or healing in terms of having the South Node there.
Yeah, I'm not going to go any further with that one, but
Greg,
yeah.
are you close?
Sorry, mate.
You close?
I'm finished. I'm done. I'm waiting for you guys to say, right, yeah, you've had enough of me.
No, we haven't had enough, but we have to pack up here, and we've got a time frame to adhere to, apparently, with the rental here. But can I just, on behalf of everyone, thank you very, very much for a wonderful beginning to the year.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you so much, mate. That was brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah. So thanks, Ben. I don't know if you want to sign off online, and we'll just wrap up here.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks, everybody. See you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
A lot of food for thought.
Hi, Kate. Love you, Kate. Just yeah, give me a bit of time, and I can do something for you.
Brilliant. I'll reach out to you, mate. Thanks so much.
See you guys.
Hi, Anne.
Hi.
Hi, all my friends. See yous.
Bye.
Bye.